Yes, it's 1:30. We're going on time today. Isn't that nice? I did put up a thing and tell you that because the Living on a Prairie thing, which is going to be epic and awesome, it's the whole grand finale with the cast, but they're late. They're late because Mercury's in retrograde and everything is broken. And so if they are having to, YouTube, they're not even doing it Facebook Live. They're actually going to have to do a YouTube Live. So there you are. Hi. Yes, they're going to go YouTube Live at 3 o'clock my time, 6 o'clock New York time, the Living on a Prairie grand finale with the whole cast and the thing and the actors. It's going to have to be 3 o'clock LA time, 6 o'clock New York time, and but it'll be epic, and it's going to be YouTube live. It's all very complicated. We'll post a thing. But that means I'm here at 1:30. Yeah, la, 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 la. So we are here, and where am I now? Where am I now? What is happening? Okay, what day is it? It's Sunday, and it's Father's Day. Do you have fathers? Do you have fathers? You should call them. Call them. If you have a father, you should call him. My husband has called his father. So it is Sunday. What? Do you want to share with the class? What? What? Okay, never mind. It's people. All right. It is Sunday, but what else is it? It is National Peaches and Cream Day. I don't have any peaches and cream, but I love those. National Day of the Gong. Go Skateboarding Day. Okay, Skateboarding Day. National Daylight Appreciation Day. National Selfie Day. This is sort of one big, a chair. Why do I have a chair? What are you doing? Oh, my food! Yes, because they're snacks. There are snacks. And Bob is moving my snacks to a more convenient location so that I can reach my snacks. That's terribly important. I'll show you my snacks. But I don't have peaches and cream. I don't. So it's peaches and cream. This is a selfie. Okay, this counts as a selfie. It's National Arizona Day. But I am not in Arizona. Where am I? I don't know where I am. It's Father's Day, and it is also Turkey Lovers Day. Did you know that Turkey Lovers Day is the third Sunday in June? You know why it is? Because turkeys, right? The turkey people who sell turkeys. They sell all their turkeys in November and like in December, and then like what, in June? They can't move any turkeys. So they made National Turkey Lovers Day in June to try to like pick up the slack and sell a few turkeys. But it's actually, I'm highly suggestible, and it's going to work on me because I love turkey, so I'll probably make turkey tonight or something. I had turkey last time. I made turkey meatballs. So I have snacks. We have some brie, and we have crackers, and we have blueberry goat cheese. So we have blueberry goat cheese, and it's not a gin, it's water. It's very good, but I have blueberry goat cheese. So I have blueberry goat cheese on a cracker. That's really good. Okay, so still, Little Town on the Prairie. I have blueberries like in my teeth, but it's awesome. I don't care. All right. Now, she's been talking about these name cards and little autograph books and all this stuff. So finally, name cards is today's chapter. And these are real. In fact, the museum, I said, Mansfield, Missouri, in the museum, they have some actual name cards from Laura and Nellie's name card in the museum. So everybody had name cards, was the thing, and they still have them in the museum. Name cards. After all the preparation for winter, it seemed that there would be no winter. The days were clear and sunny. The frozen ground was bare of snow. The fall term of school ended, and Miss Wilder went back to Minnesota. Ooh, good riddance, because after all that, right? The new teacher, Mr. Cluett, was quiet but firm, a good disciplinarian. There was not a sound in school now, except the low voices of classes reciting, and in the rows of seats every pupil diligently studied. Hey, is this like because of the school board thing, that visit? Because the last thing I visited from the school board, and it was like a giant disaster. Did they just say, maybe you need the vacation? Maybe you need the vacation, we need to bring in the guy. Is that maybe? It's also because the big boys come in from the farms, and there's no way they were letting her have them. All the big boys were coming to school. Cap Garland was there, his face tanned, dark red brown, and his pale hair and pale blue eyes seeming almost white. His smile still flashed, quick as lightning and warmer than sunshine. Everyone remembered that he had made the terrible trip with Almanzo Wilder last winter to bring the wheat that saved them all from dying of hunger. They were going to starve to death. And it was Almanzo and Cap who got on the sleigh and went to the town and got the food. Ben Woodworth came back to school, and Fred Gilbert, whose father had brought in the last mail after the train stopped running, and Arthur Johnson, Minnie's brother. Okay, Fred Gilbert. Now we know who Nellie really is. Because Nellie Owens, like I said, Nellie Owens isn't there. She's not into Smet. She's not into Smet. She's gone. She's gone. She's snorking. So who is this Nellie Oleson? Is Laura basing this on? Because Nellie Owens ain't there no more. She's Walnut Grove. And I said, it's either Genevieve Masters or Stella Gilbert. Oops, she let cat out of the bag. Oh yeah, Fred Gilbert. That would be Nellie. That would, yeah. It's Stella and Fred Gilbert. And so this is really a person named Stella is doing all this. Okay. Arthur Johnson, Minnie's brother. Still, there was no snow. At recess and at noon, the boys played baseball, and the big girls did not play outdoors anymore. Nellie worked at her crocheting. Ida and Minnie and Mary Power stood at the window watching the ball games. Sometimes Laura stood with them, but usually she stayed at her desk and studied. She had a feeling of haste, almost a fear that she would not be able to pass the examinations and get a teacher's certificate when she was 16. She was almost 15 now. Oh, see, Nellie's crocheting because she doesn't have Miss Wilder anymore to play palace, intrigue, dangerous liaisons, and ruin everyone's life. So she's had to take up knitting and crocheting in her spare time. Oh, come on, Laura. Come watch this ball game, Ida coaxed one noon. You have a whole year to study before you need to know so much. Laura closed her book. She was happy that the girls wanted her. Nellie scornfully tossed her head. I'm glad I don't have to be a teacher, she said. My folks can get along without my having to work. What an effort. Laura held her voice low and answered sweetly, Of course you needn't, Nellie, but you see, we aren't poor relations being helped out by our folks back east. Nellie was so angry that she stammered as she tried to speak, and Mary Power interrupted her coolly. If Laura wants to teach school, I don't know that it's anybody's business. Laura is smart. She'll be a good teacher. Yes, Ida said. She's far ahead of... She stopped because the door opened and Cap Garland came in. He had come straight from town, and he had in his hand a small striped paper bag. Hello, girls, he said, looking at Mary Power, and his smile lighted up as he held out the bag to her. Have some candy? So Laura really kind of likes Cap, hasn't figured out the Almanzo thing yet, but Cap likes Mary Power. And Nellie, well, anyone she can get, basically. So he's handing his candy out to Mary Power. Nellie was quick. Oh, Cappy, she cried, taking the bag. How did you know that I like candy so much? It's nicest candy in town, too. She smiled up into his face with a look that Laura had never seen before. Cap seemed startled, and then he looked sheepish. Would you girls like some? Nellie went on generously, and quickly she offered each one the open bag. Then, taking a piece herself, she put the bag in her skirt pocket. She just took the whole thing. He was offering a piece. She took the whole thing. Cap looked pleadingly at Mary Power, who's the one he actually likes right now. But she tossed her head and looked away. Uncertainly, he said, Well, I'm glad you like it. And he went out to the ball game. The next day at noon, he brought candy again. Again, he tried to give it to Mary Power, and again, Nellie was too quick. This is steal other people's candy with. Oh, Cappy, you are such a dear boy to bring me more candy, she said, smiling up at him. This time, she turned a little away from the others. She had no eyes for anyone but Cap. I mustn't be a pig and eat it all of myself. Do have a piece, Cappy, she coaxed. He took a piece, and she rapidly ate all the rest while she murmured to Cap how nice he was, and so tall and so strong. Cap looked helpless, yet pleased. He would never be able to cope with Nellie, Laura knew. Mary Power was too proud to enter into competition with her. Angrily, Laura wondered, must a girl like Nellie be able to just grab what she wants? It was not only the candy. Until Mr. Cluett rang the bell, Nellie kept Cap by her side and listening to her. The others pretended not to notice them. Laura asked Mary Power to write in her autograph album. All the girls but Nellie were writing in each other's albums. Nellie did not have one. Well, and everyone hates me, and nobody wanted to write in it, so, Mary Power sat at her desk and carefully wrote with ink, while the others waited to read the verse when she finished it. Her writing was beautiful, and so was the verse she had chosen. The rose of the valley may wither, the pleasures of youth pass away, but friendship will blossom forever, while all other flowers decay. Oh, Laura's album had many treasures in it now. There was the verse that Ma had written, and on the next page was Ida's. In memory's golden casket, drop one pearl for me, your loving friend, Ida B. Wright. Every now and then Cap looked helplessly at them over Nellie's shoulder, but they paid no attention to him or Nellie. Minnie Johnson asked Laura to write in her album, and Laura said, I will if you'll write in mine. I'll do my best, but I can't write as beautifully as Mary does. Her writing is just like copper plate, Minnie said, and she sat down and wrote, When the name that I write here is dim on the page, and the leaves of your album are yellow with age, still think of me kindly, and do not forget that wherever I am, I remember you yet, Minnie Johnson. These are all kind of sappy. We wrote funnier things in our yearbooks, I don't know. Then the bell rang, and they all went to their seats. That afternoon at recess, Nellie sneered at autograph albums. Oh, they're out of date, she said. I used to have one, but I wouldn't have one of those old things now. No one believed her. She said, oh, in the East, where I come from, it's name cards that are all the rage now. What are name cards? I'd asked. Nellie pretended to be surprised. Oh, then she smiled. Well, of course, you wouldn't know. I'll bring mine to school and show you, but I won't give you one because you haven't one to give me. It's only proper to exchange name cards. Everybody's exchanging name cards now in the East. They did not believe her. Autograph albums could not be out of style because theirs were almost new. Ma had just bought Laura's from Vinton, Iowa, only last September. On the way home after school, Minnie Johnson said, She's just bragging. I don't believe she had name cards. I don't even believe there's any such thing. But next morning, she and Mary Power were so eager to see Laura that they waited for her to come out of the house. Mary Power had found out about name cards. Jake Hopp, who ran the newspaper, had them at the newspaper office next to the bank. They were colored cards with colored pictures of flowers and birds, and Mr. Hopp would print your name on them. Now, of course, they didn't have, well, your phone number, because there was no phone. And you certainly didn't have your email or your Twitter account. So, it was just your name. And you handed them to people who were in your town, so they pretty much already, knew where you lived. So, literally, it was a name card. It was the beginning of the business card, but it was a name card. I don't believe Nellie Oleson has any, Minnie still declared. She only found out about them before we did, and she plans to get some and pretend they came from the East. How much do they cost? Laura asked. That depends on the pictures and the kind of printing, Mary told him. I'm getting a dozen with plain printing for 25 cents. Laura said no more. Mary Power's father was the tailor, and he could work all winter, but now there was no carpentering work for in town and would be none till spring. Pa had 5 to feed at home and Mary to keep in college. It was folly to even think of spending 25 cents for mere pleasure. Nellie had not brought her name cards that morning. Minnie asked her as soon as they gathered around the stove, where she was warming her hands after the long, chilly walk to school. Oh, my goodness, I forgot all about them, she said. I guess I'll have to tie a string on my finger to remind me. Minnie's look said to Mary Powers and Laura, I told you so. At noon that day, Cap did bring candy again, and as usual, Nellie was nearest the door. She began to coo, ooh, Cappy! And just as she was grasping for the bag of candy, Laura reached and whisked it from her surprised hand and gave it to Mary Power. Yes! Everyone was startled, even Laura. Then Cap's smile lighted his whole face. He glanced gratefully at Laura and then looked at Mary. Thank you, Mary said to him. We will all enjoy the candy so much. She offered it to the others, while While he went out to the ball game, Cap gave one backward look, a grin of delight. "Have a piece, Nellie," Mary Power invited. "I will." Nellie took the largest piece. "I do like Cap's candy, but as for him, pooh, you may have the greenie." Mary Power flushed, but she did not answer. Laura felt her own face flush. "I guess you'd take him well enough if you could have him," she said. "You knew all the time he was bringing candy to Mary." "Oh, my goodness. I could twist him around my finger if I wanted to," Nellie bragged. "Oh, he isn't such a much. It's that chum of his I want to know. That young Mr. Wilder with the funny name. You'll see," she smiled to herself. "I'm going riding behind those horses of his." Oh, yeah, this is how well she knows Almanzo. She refers to him only as that Wilder boy with the funny name. Because Almanzo, which, you know, it was a really funny. Did you know why he is called Almanzo? Have we gone over this? Almanzo is from Almanzor. And the Wilder family passed this down through the generations. And they told them that during, yes, the Crusades, that a Wilder family member from England went to the Crusades, and during the war, his life was saved by an Arab man named Almanzor. And they owed him a great debt, and they named a child a derivative of Almanzor, which eventually became Almanzo. And that's why it's not Almanzo, like us idiots said on the show. It is Almanzo, like manly, Almanzo, but it's from Almanzor. Go figure. There you go. So, he's indeed Almanzo of the funny name. Oh, yeah, so someone said, or as Mrs. Olsen said, Zaldamo. So she's completely evil. That chum of his, I want to know. Scheming. Surely she would, Laura thought. Nellie had been so friendly with Miss Wilder. It was a wonder that Miss Wilder's brother had not invited her for a drive before now. As for herself, Laura knew she'd spoiled any chance of such a pleasure. Mary Power's name cards were finished the next week, and she brought them to school. They were beautiful. The cards were palest green, and on each was a picture of a bobolink swaying. Okay, bobolink? Anyone? What is a bobolink? Okay, bobolink swaying and singing. Oh, it's a bird on a spray of goldenrod. Okay, guys, bobolink, it's a bird. It's a bird. Someone, yes, I guess it's a bird. They'll tell me. Okay, good. Swinging on the goldenrod. Beneath it was printed in black letters, Mary Powers. She gave one to Minnie, one to Ida, and one to Laura, though they had none to give her. That same day, Nellie brought hers to school. They were pale yellow, with a bouquet of pansies and a scroll that said, "For thoughts." Oh my God, could she be more, completely full of it? Her name was printed in letters like handwriting. She traded one of her cards for one of Mary's. Next day, Minnie said she was going to buy some. Her father had given her the money, and she would order them after school if the other girls would come with her. Ida could not go. She said cheerfully, I ought not to waste time. Besides, I'm an adopted child, you see. I have to hurry home to help with the housework as much as I can. I couldn't ask for name cards. Father Brown is a preacher, and such things are a vanity. So I'll just enjoy looking at yours when you get them, Minnie. Ew. I mean, they've already adopted her. I mean, doesn't she now, have they adopted her as a house slave? I mean, what are they doing to this poor child? It's terrible. Oh, yeah, Barbara says bobolink is a bird. It is a bird. Okay. So poor Ida is just so down on herself here. Isn't she a dear, Mary Power said after Ida had left them. No one could help loving Ida. Laura wished to be like her, but she wasn't. Secretly, she so wanted name cards, she almost felt envious of Mary Power and Minnie. In the newspaper office, Mr. Hop, his ink-spotted apron, spread the sample cards on the counter for them to see. Each card was more beautiful than the last. And Laura was mean enough to be pleased that Nellie's was among them. It proved that she'd bought her cards there. They were every pale, lovely color. Some even had gilt edges. There was a choice of 6 different bouquets, and one had a bird's nest nestled among the flowers, 2 birds on its rim, and above them the word love. That's a young man's card, Mr. Hop told them. Only a young fellow's brash enough to hand out a card with love on it. Of course, Minnie murmured. Minnie murmured, there's one. And then Minnie murmured, flushing. It was so hard to choose among them that finally Mr. Hop said, well, take your time. I'll go on getting out the paper. And here he is. Oh, this is central casting here. Here's Mr. Hop and his cards in the little store. This Mr. Hop. There he is. He went back to inking the type and laying sheets of paper on it. He had lighted the lamp before Minnie finally decided to take the pale blue card. Then, guiltily, because they were so late, they all hurried home. Pa was washing his hands and Ma was putting supper on the table when Laura came in breathless. Quietly, Ma asked, "Where have you been, Laura?" "I'm sorry, Ma. I only meant to take a minute," Laura apologized. She told them about the name cards. Of course, she did not say that she wanted some. Pa remarked that Jake was up and coming, bringing out such novelties. "How much do they cost?" he asked. And Laura answered the cheapest cost 25 cents a dozen. It was almost bedtime, and Laura was staring at the wall, thinking about the War of 1812, when Pa folded his paper, laid it down, and said, Laura, wait, she's lying in bed, looking at the wall and thinking about the War of 1812. Who lies in bed and goes, I hadn't thought about the War of 1812 in a while. Why does she think about the war? They don't even say why. She just suddenly started thinking about the War of 1812. This is very weird. But Pa folded his paper and laid it down and said, Laura? Yes, Pa? You want some of these newfangled name cards, don't you? Pa asked. I was just thinking the same thing, Charles, said Ma. Well, yes, I do want them, Laura admitted, but I don't need them. Pa's eyes smiled, twinkling at her as he took from his pocket some coins and counted out 2 dimes and a nickel. I guess you can have them, Half-Pint, he said. Here you are. Laura hesitated. Do you really think I ought to? Can we afford to? She asked. Laura, Ma said. She meant, are you questioning what your Pa does? Quickly, Laura said, oh, Pa, thank you. Then Ma said, you are a good girl, Laura, and we want you to have the pleasures of other girls of your age. Before school tomorrow morning, if you hurry, you can run up the street and order your name cards. That's actually pretty sporting for the Ingalls, that they're like saying, yes, we're good. You completely no, you do not need name cards. It is, as the girl said, utter vanity, and normally Mom would go, seriously? But they've decided after, I guess, everything she went through with Nellie and Miss Wilder, go, here, get some name cards, get some name cards. So that's good of her. In her lonely bed that night, I guess thinking about the War of 1812, without Mary, Laura felt ashamed. She was not truly good like Ma and Mary and Ida Brown. At that very minute, she was so happy to think of having name cards, not only because they were beautiful, but partly to be meanly even with Nellie Oleson, and partly to have things as nice as Mary Power and Minnie had. Covet, 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 covet. Mr. Hop promised that the cards would be ready on Wednesday at noon, and that day Laura could hardly eat her dinner. Ma excused her from doing the dishes, and she hurried to the newspaper office. There they were, delicate pink cards with a spray of pinker roses and blue cornflowers. Her name was printed in thin, clear type, Laura Elizabeth Ingalls. And yet those pictures. You see, the cards got pictures, little flowers on screens. She had hardly time to admire them, for she must not be late to school. A long block from 2nd Street, she was hurrying along the board sidewalk when suddenly a shining buggy pulled up beside it. Laura looked up, surprised to see the Brown Morgans. Young Mr. Wilder stood by the buggy, his cap in one hand. He held out his other hand to her and said, like a ride to the schoolhouse? You'll get there quicker. He's the handsomest guy in town. And okay, also, though she's 14, he's 24. But there you go, it's the Prairie. And we did have, what was it, like 3 books ago, where a friend of hers got married off at 12, and the family was like, she was getting old, we married her off, she was 12, and even Laura and her friends are like, ew. So she's 14 though, but she's getting in a car with a stranger. Oops. But it's okay, it's Almanzo. He took her hand and helped her into the buggy and stepped in beside her. Laura was almost speechless with surprise and shyness and the delight of actually riding behind those beautiful horses. Still, horses. No. Hello, it's Almanzo. No, oh, look at the horses. Yeah, okay. They trotted gaily but very slowly, and their small ears twitched, listening for the word to go faster. I'm Laura Ingalls, Laura said. It was a silly thing to say. Of course he must know who she was. I know your father, and I've seen you around town for quite a while, he replied. My sister often spoke of you. Oh, that's probably not good. Such beautiful horses, what are their names, she asked. She knew quite well, but she had to say something. The near one is Lady, and the other is Prince, he told her. Laura wished he would let them go faster, as fast as they could go, but it would not be polite to ask. She thought of speaking about the weather, but that seemed silly. She could not think of anything to say, and in all this time, they'd only gone 1 block. I've been getting my name cards, she heard herself saying. Oh, that's so, he said. Mine are just plain cards. I brought them out from Minnesota. He took one from his pocket and handed it to her. He was driving with one capable hand, keeping the lines in play between his gloved fingers. The card was plain and white. Printed on it in old English letters was Almanzo James Wilder. It's kind of an outlandish name, he said. Lord, am I back? Am I back? Oh, it's so scary. I think I'm back. Wait, I'm back. And let there be light. That was scary. Did I go away or was I still here for you? Because I went away for me. It said, no, you have no connection. It went away. But apparently I'm back. Awesome. So, Almanzo says, it was wished upon me, he said grimly. My folks have got a notion there always has to be an Almanzo in the family, because way back at the time of the Crusades, see, I didn't make this up. Did I make this up? I did not make this up. Time of the Crusades, there was a Wilder went to them, and an Arab or somebody saved his life. El Manzoor, the name was. They changed it after a while in England, but I guess there's no way to improve it much. I think it is a very interesting name, said Laura honestly. She did think so, but she did not know what to do with the card. It seemed rude to give it back to him, but perhaps he did not mean her to keep it. She held it so that he could take it back if he wanted to. The team turned the corner at 2nd Street. In a panic, Laura wondered whether, if he did not take back his card, she should give him one of hers. Nellie had said it was proper to exchange name cards. She held the card a little nearer him so he could see it plainly. He went on driving. Do you want your card back? Laura asked him. Oh, you can keep it if you want to, he replied. Then, do you want one of mine? She took out one of the package and gave it to him. He looked at it and thanked her. It is a very pretty card, he said as he put it in his pocket. They were at the schoolhouse. He held the reins while he sprang out of the buggy, took off his cap, and offered his hand to help her down. Swim. She did not need help. She barely touched his glove with her mitten tip as she came lightly to the ground. Thank you for the ride, she said. Don't mention it, he answered. His hair was not black as she had thought. It was dark brown, and his eyes were such a dark blue that they did not look pale in his darkly tanned face. He had a steady, dependable, yet light-hearted look. Hello, Wilder, Cap Garland greeted him, and he waved in answer as he drove away. Mr. Clewitt was ringing the bell. The boys were trooping in. As Laura slipped into her seat, there was barely time for Ida to squeeze her arm delightedly and whisper, Oh, I wish you could have seen her face when you came driving up. Mary Power and Minnie were beaming at Laura across the aisle, but Nellie was looking intently away from her. So yes, she did. She rode up in Almanzo's buggy right smack in front of Nellie Oleson, and he took her hand and helped her out and took her card. Okay. So you've been really good, and the Sociable is short. The Sociable is next short. So you get two. You get two. Happy Father's Day. You get two. Okay. Number 17, the Sociable. It's not too long. So. And then after that, they go like gigantic, huge ones. So we'll do Sociable. One Saturday afternoon, Mary Power came blowing in to see Laura. Her cheeks were pink with excitement. The Ladies' Aid Society was giving a dime sociable in Mrs. Tinkham's rooms over the furniture store next Friday night. I don't know which is more hilarious, the Ladies' Aid Society dime sociable or the fact that there's something called Mrs. Tinkham's rooms. I did not know about Mrs. Tinkham and her rooms. This is good. I'll go if you do, Laura, Mary Power said. Oh, please may she, Mrs. Ingalls. Laura did not like to ask what a dime sociable was. Fond as she was of Mary Power, she felt at a slight disadvantage with her. Mary Power's clothes were so beautifully fitted because her father tailored them, and she did her hair in the stylish new way with bangs. Ma said that Laura might go to the Sociable. She had not heard until now that a ladies' aid was organized. To tell the truth, Pa and Ma were sadly disappointed that the dear Reverend Alden from Plum Creek was not the preacher. He had wanted to be, and the church had sent him, but when he arrived, he found that Reverend Brown had established himself there. So dear Reverend Alden had gone on as a missionary to the unsettled West. Pa and Ma could not lose interest in the church, of course, and Ma would work in the ladies' aid. Still, they could not feel as they would have felt had Reverend Alden been the preacher. All next week, Laura and Mary Power looked forward to the Sociable. It cost a dime. Okay, you get your 25-cent cards, now you got your 10-cent Sociable, these people are going to go broke. So Minnie and Ida doubted they could go, and Nellie said that really it didn't interest her. Friday seemed long to Laura and Mary Power. They were so impatient for night to come. That night, Laura did not take off her school dress, but put on a long apron and pinned its bib under her chin. Supper was early, and as soon as she'd washed the dishes, Laura began to get ready for the Sociable. Ma helped her carefully brush her dress. It was brown woolen, made in princess style. The collar was a high, tight band, close under Laura's chin, and the skirt came down to the tops of her high-button shoes. It was a very pretty dress, with pipings of red around the wrists and collar, and the buttons all down the front were of brown horn, with a tiny raised castle in the center of each one. It's very fancy, very fancy. Standing before the looking-glass in the front room where the lamp was, Laura carefully brushed and braided her hair and put it up and took it down again. She could not arrange it to suit her. "Oh, Ma, I do wish you would let me cut bangs," she almost begged. "Mary Power wears them and they're so stylish." I like bangs. Okay. "Your hair looks nice the way it is," said Ma. "Mary Power is a nice girl, but I think the new hairstyle is, well, we called it a lunatic fringe." "Your hair looks beautiful, Laura," Carrie consoled her. "It's such a pretty brown and so long and thick, and it shines in the light." Laura still looked unhappily at her reflection. She thought of the short hairs always growing at the edge around her forehead. They did not show when they were brushed back, but now she combed them all out and downward. They made a thin little fringe. "Oh, please, Ma," she coaxed. "I wouldn't cut a heavy bang like Mary Power, but please, let me cut just a little more so I could curl it across my forehead." "Very well, then," Ma gave her consent. Laura took the shears from Ma's work basket, and standing before the glass, oh no, she's going to cut her own hair. How badly does that usually go? Okay. Before the glass, she cut the hair above her forehead into a narrow fringe about 2 inches long. She laid her long slate pencil on the heater, and when it was heated, she held it by the cool end and wound wisps of her short hair around the heated end. She curled her hair with a slate pencil. She didn't have a curling iron. She warmed up her slate pencil and rolled her freaking hair with this. But chopping own hair in mirror, yes, with sewing shears. This will go badly. This is a very bad idea. That's terrible. And then curling it with a pencil. Holding each wisp around the pencil, she curled her bangs. The rest of her hair she combed smoothly back and braided. She wound the long braid flatly around and around on the back of her head and snugly pinned it. "Turn around and let me see you," Ma said. Laura turned. "Do you like it, Ma?" "It looks quite nice," Ma admitted. "Still, I liked it better before it was cut." "Turn this way and let me see," said Pa. He looked at her a long minute, and his eyes were pleased. "Well, if you must wear this lunatic fringe, I think you've made a good job of it." And Pa turned again to his paper. "I think it is pretty. You look very nice," Carrie said softly. Laura put on her brown coat and set carefully over her head her peaked hood of brown woolen lined with blue. The brown and blue edges of cloth were pinked, and the hood had long ends that wound around her neck like a muffler. Oh, that was that thing the other day, what was that weird word where she knit that thing? And I was like, what the heck? It's muffler. She took one more look in the glass. Her cheeks were pink with excitement, and the curl bangs were stylish under the hood's blue lining that made her eyes very blue. Ma gave her a dime and said, Have a pleasant time, Laura. I'm sure you'll remember your manners. Harumph. Pa asked, had I better go with her as far as the door, Caroline? It's early yet, and only across the street, and she's going with Mary Power, Ma answered. Oh, yes, they live in the big city now. They're, afraid to have her go out. Laura went out into the dark and starry night. Her heart was beating fast with anticipation. Her breath puffed white in the frosty air. Lamplight made glowing patches on the sidewalk in front of the hardware store and the drugstore, and above the dark furniture store, 2 windows shone bright. Mary Power came out of the tailor shop, and together they climbed the outdoor stairs between it and the furniture store. Somebody said, beer cans used as curlers. Well, those were for giant curls, but yes, you could curl your hair with beer cans back in the day. I did not do that. Weird, but it was the big centers. Mary Power knocked on the door, and Mrs. Tinkham opened it. Tinkham opened it. She was a tiny woman in a black dress with white lace ruffles at her throat and wrists. She said, good evening, and took Mary Power's dime and Laura's. Then she said, come this way to leave your wraps. All the week, Laura had hardly been able to wait to see what a sociable was, and now she was here. Some people were sitting in a lighted room. She felt embarrassed as she hurriedly followed Mrs. Tinkham past them into a small bedroom. She and Mary Power laid their coats and hoods on the bed. Then quietly they slipped into chairs in the larger room. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson sat on either side of the window. The window had dotted Swiss curtains, and before it stood a polished center table holding a large glass lamp with a white china shade on which red roses were printed. Beside the lamp lay a green plush photograph album. It's a fancy house. A bright flowered carpet, covered the whole floor. A tall, shining heater with isinglass windows. Isinglass windows stood in the center. The chairs around the walls were all of polished wood. This is starting to sound like Nellie also. We have carpet. We have real lace curtains. It's like the same thing. And the chairs of polished wood. Mr. and Mrs. Woodsworth were sitting on a sofa with shining high wooden back and ends and a glittering black haircloth seat. Haircloth. Only the wall of boards were like those in the front room at home, and these were thickly hung with pictures of people and places that Laura did not know. Some had wide, heavy, gilded frames. Of course, Mr. Tinkham owned the furniture store. Cap Garland's older sister, Florence, was there. Did you know there was a Florence? I didn't. Florence? Where did Florence go? Suddenly there's somebody named Florence in this story. Brie. Geez. Florence, where was I? Get caught up on my comments. Florence came in, and with her mother, Mrs. Beardsley was there, and Mrs. Beardsley and Mrs. Bradley, the druggist's wife. Now there's a druggist. There's a pharmacy. Did they mention the pharmacy? Now there's a pharmacy. I just can't keep up. They all sat dressed up and silent. Mary Power and Laura did not speak either. They did not know what to say. Someone knocked at the door. Mrs. Tinkham hurried to it, and Reverend and Mrs. Brown came in. His rumbling voice filled the room with greetings to everyone, and then he talked with Mrs. Tinkham about the home she had left in Massachusetts. Oh, not much like this place, he said, but we are all strange here. He fascinated Laura. She did not like him. Pa said he claimed to be a cousin of John Brown of Osawatomie. Who had killed so many men in Kansas and finally succeeded in starting the Civil War. Yikes, that's a thing you're bragging about? Reverend Brown did look just like the picture of John Brown in Laura's history book. His face was large and bony. His eyes were sunk deep under shaggy white eyebrows, and they shone hot and fierce even when he was smiling. His coat hung loose on his big body. His hands at the end of his sleeves were large and rough with big knuckles. Ew. He was untidy. Around his mouth, his long white beard was stained yellow as if dribbling tobacco juice. And this is the Reverend? Okay, no wonder they liked Reverend Alden. He talked a great deal, and after he came, the others talked some, except Mary Power and Laura. They tried to sit still politely, but now and then they did fidget. It was a long time before Mrs. Tinkham began to bring plates from the kitchen. On each plate was a small sauce dish of custard, and a piece of cake. When Laura had eaten hers, she murmured to Mary Power, "Let's go home." And Mary answered, "Come on, I'm going." They set their empty dishes on a small table near them, put on their coats and hoods, and said goodbye to Mrs. Tinkham. Down the street once more, Laura drew a deep breath. If that is a sociable, I don't like sociables. Neither do I, Mary Power agreed. I wish I hadn't gone. I'd rather have the dime. Pa and Ma looked up in surprise when Laura came in, and Carrie eagerly asked, "Did you have a good time, Laura?" "Well, no, I didn't," Laura had to admit. "You should have gone, Ma, instead of me. Mary Power and I were the only girls there. We had no one to talk to." "This is only the first sociable," Ma made excuse. "No doubt when folks here are better acquainted, the sociables will be more interesting. I know from reading The Advance that church sociables are greatly enjoyed." There you go. That's a sociable. So they had what we used to call that having a Mary Tyler Moore party. You remember those? You'd have a party and everyone would just like sit around and like then nothing happened. It was a Mary Tyler Moore party. So they had a sociable, but they didn't know how. So they all just kind of sat there staring at each other eating cake. But a sociable is supposed to have like readings, or somebody reads poetry, or there's music or something. And they do, by golly, get it together, because then they have literaries. And the literaries, they indeed, people get up and do speeches and read things, and things get more exciting. Causing her to have another chapter called The Whirl of Gaiety, where things get really exciting. They start having parties, actual parties, and she's like old enough to go. The birthday party, which is like huge, and they play games, and then those madcap days, and then madcap days takes a horrible, dark, awful turn, and everything becomes racist and terrible, because it's the 1800s. But we'll manage it. We'll get through it. But Sociable was totally boring. But Laura has cards. She has cards now. And she's already gone for that first buggy ride with Almanzo. She's only 14. He's 24. Ew. But she's gone for the buggy ride, and she's made Nellie become hysterical. So things are looking up. And we all know that within 2 years, she will in fact be married to him. So, yes, things. Oh, you're right. Things, many things. Now, what time is it? Do you know? Do we people? 2:12. 2:12. At 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock here, 6 o'clock New York time, Eastern, 3 o'clock here. Living on a Prairie is going to be on YouTube Live, because things went kablooey. Mercury's in retrograde and people's computers like exploded or something. So it's not going to be Facebook Live. It's going to be YouTube Live, Living on a Prairie, and it's the grand finale and the whole thing about the actors fund. So that's happening. The 25th, of course, I will be in my living room doing my show, things, and you get the newsletter, don't you? You got to get the Nellie newsletter. You notice it on my Twitter. I've been putting up the link. Loose Gravel Prod. You go to email loosegravelprod@aol.com, and you get that. I want the Nellie newsletter, and you get the newsletter, which includes the saga of Sock Monkey. This is Sock Monkey. He's all dressed up. Hi, how you doing? And Sock Monkey is in the newsletter, and he'll be doing things. There's going to be things happening. So stay tuned. Everything's going to be good. And tomorrow's chocolate eclair day. We're getting chocolate eclairs. And I will see you soon. So, go, like, it's YouTube, Living on a Prairie TV, Living on a Prairie TV at YouTube at 3 o'clock. So, wash your hands, and wear your bonnets, and wear your masks, and if it's hot like here, put on some sunblock. Good. And take care of each other, and I'll see you tomorrow.